Today's video is a little bit different than my normal type of content because I'm here to answer all of your questions. I recently passed 500,000 subscribers here on YouTube. And so I asked you to let me know what some of your questions are, and I'm going to be answering them today. I do have some notes written here, so I will be looking at those a little bit just to make sure that I don't meander too much and talk too much, because there are a lot of questions and I would like to both answer everything thoroughly and also get through all of them. So with that said, question number 1 is from Kim Crow Art 7876, and she asks, do you ever paint large, like 16 by 20 or larger? If so, I would love to see a video showing your process. I don't so much anymore, but I used to for most of my life. I think I was painting larger and drawing larger. In academia, it's just very much celebrated. The bigger, the better, not only as a student, but also if you teach and there are faculty shows, most people do large work. It's just something that's, the norm. It really wasn't until I left academia and moved to England and just sort of fell into doing tiny art that I started painting smaller. So yes, I did. I don't paint large with watercolor. If I do paint larger, it's with oil paints. And I'll have a little video here overlaid just to show you what some of that process is like. I usually start with a monochromatic underpainting. The series that I'm showing you here is, I think, all monochromatic, but I do larger works with oil paints as well. So I always start with some type of wash, and then I pull out main forms, and then I build darks, and then I add color. So that's my process for oil painting. And I do have an oil painting playlist here. They're short videos, but I paint with water mixable oils. So there are some tips and tricks for that if that's something that interests you. Question number 2 is from Carol Henderson 6537, and she asks, when can I get a hold of your book? So for those of you who may not know, I'm in the final processes of finishing a book that I've written. It's called The Big Book of Tiny Painting, and the release date is March 24th, I believe, 2026. It is available for pre-order, which is something that I just discovered recently, but you can get it on Amazon. You can get it if you're in the US at Barnes & Noble. If you're in the UK, you can get it at Waterstones. So it is available there. So I'll be talking more about that as the time gets nearer for it to be released. But in the meantime, if you think you're going to want it and you want to pre-order, that would be awesome. And I can't wait to share it with you all. Question number 3 is from Kathy Flayman. Congratulations. Can you tell us more about your book? When or where is it available, or even the title, or just whatever you're ready to share about it? Okay, so I've already told you a little bit. The title is The Big Book of Tiny Painting, and my name is Leslie Strohs. So if you just Google that, you'll probably find some place local to where you live where you can buy it. And it is going to be translated into multiple languages. So if you're French or German or Spanish, you should be able to buy it in your language, which I think is a really cool feature with my publisher that they offer that. The subtitle is An Artist's Guide to Painting Outside in Ink and Watercolor. And I think for brevity, I'm going to read to you what the publisher has written about it. It's a complete watercolor course in miniature. The tools, techniques, and materials for tiny painting is packed with tutorials, step-by-steps, and expert insight. It's highly original and the most portable art manual for painting the great outdoors. Okay, so yes, that describes it pretty much perfectly. Basically, it's a guide for painting small, but it's also a guide for painting outside. So many of the tips that I give in some of the techniques chapters are applicable for anybody painting outside in ink and watercolor. I talk about methods for scaling things down and painting on a smaller format. And I also have a whole chapter about techniques for drawing as well as painting. I talk about everything you need. I share my supplies and setups and ideas for that and for how to find places to paint. There are step-by-steps. So it's a really comprehensive book all about tiny painting. And I've just loved writing it. I actually finished writing it at the end of May, beginning of June, but the publishing process takes a while to get the layout sorted, to get extra photographs taken in some beautiful locations, and just to pretty it up a little bit. So I'll be telling you more about that in the next few months. Question number 4 is from @jamfjord. Your regular viewers know that you have painted much of your adopted home county of Devon, but where is your favorite place in Britain to paint outside of Devon? And now that you have your mobile studio, which unexplored locations would you most like to visit and paint in the future? So basically, I really love painting close to home. So even though I have the plein air mobile, I don't usually like to venture more than an hour away for now anyway, mostly because I just like to be here for my husband and my little dog. My husband's nervous about me camping overnight, understandably. And so I mostly just use it for extended day trips. I do want to go on some excursions that are a little bit further afield. So I also love painting in Cornwall. I would love to go to the Isle of Wight sometime soon and might be doing so. I love to paint in the Cotswolds. I've painted there a few times, like at Blenheim Palace and Bowood House, and the landscape there is really beautiful, as is the architecture. And it's on my wish list, my bucket list really, to explore Scotland. It's someplace that I can't believe I've lived in England, I think coming up on 11 years. Well, more than 11 years now, actually. And I still haven't been there, which is ridiculous. But that is definitely on my to-do list for sometime in the near future. Oh, and I'd also love to paint the Lake District. I just think I would love it. I think I would absolutely love it. I love lakes. My daughter visited there before, and I just think it would be incredibly inspirational. So those are things on my wish list, places that I hope to get within the next year or two. And of course, I'll be sharing that here with all of you. Question number 5 is from Brenda Scott Loves Cellos and Cats. And she says, I'd love to hear more about the interdisciplinary connection you've got with music. And along with this, do you listen to music when you make your art? If so, what are your favorites? Thanks for sharing your work on YouTube and Patreon. I hope to get to attend one of your workshops someday. I love your work and miss living in England. I can understand that you would miss living here. I really love it. And that's one of the reasons that I really like to share my painting adventures with people, to get to share a little bit of this beautiful part of the planet that I live on with everybody. So first of all, I'm in the process of finalizing an artist retreat, a painting retreat that will be in Devon in spring 2026. And I'll be announcing that first on Patreon for my patrons, if anybody there wants to join. And then I'll be announcing it here on YouTube to everybody else. So that's in the works. I've also had some of my patrons ask me to do maybe a smaller workshop closer to where I visit my family in the US. So I am thinking also potentially about organizing some type of a 3-day workshop that would be in the Chicago area. So just if you're interested in that, you can stay tuned and keep your eyes open, because hopefully I'll be able to have both of those coming up very soon for people who want to study with me. But to answer the question about the interdisciplinary connection between music and art for me, I don't know that I really marry my music and art too much. I love music. I started playing the piano when I was 6. And I took lessons for several years because my mom made me, and I hated it, but then I loved it once I got to be a teenager, and I really appreciate that she made me do that. I also picked up the guitar when I was in my teens. And then in my late 20s, I don't know what happened, I just started writing songs. So I've always loved writing as well as art. So for those of you who might not know, creative writing was a passion. I almost went that route. So I actually even have a little CD. It's not in print or anything like that. It was just a homegrown thing that I would sell. And I did some concerts when I was, younger, around that time. So at coffee shops and wine bars and things like that. It was a lot of fun. And through music, I met my husband because I shared my work online, and we met that way. And he is a professional musician, and I pretty much just leave it to him at this point, not because I don't think I'm worthy, just because I've been spending so much time in art, and then having taught art, it just took up a lot of time. And there's only so many hours in the day, really, to do everything that you want to do. Sometimes I'll do backing vocals for his music, and I also illustrate his CDs. So in that regard, the connection between music and art, I love lyrics. I listen to his music a lot in the studio, and especially if there's a new CD I'm working on, because the connection between his lyrics and the art that I'm going to do for his CDs is pretty strong. So do I listen to music when I'm painting? Sometimes, but not as much really as you'd imagine. Music tends to just get me excited and not be too calming. So if I do listen to music, it's usually classical. I love Beethoven and Tchaikovsky and Mozart and Rachmaninoff. I love all classical music, really. And then I do have lots of other musicians that I love to listen to, a lot of folk musicians, rock, oldies, as well as contemporary musicians. I love Phineas. I love Taylor Swift. But I also love more indie musicians like Dar Williams and Antje Duvacot and Patty Griffin. But again, I find that usually when I'm painting, if I'm in the studio, I'm usually listening to podcasts. And if I'm out painting in nature, I don't listen to anything. It's really a meditative experience for me. And I just so much enjoy being outside and feeling the wind and listening to the sounds of nature. And so, yeah, I hope that answers your question. The next question is from @human_maybe6690, who asks, what do you think about having a pen name for an art account? Should art be kept under a legal name? Okay, that is a really good question. In terms of legality, you can use any name and then still register your channels, your social media channels, your website, or any other thing that you do under your legal name. Nobody even needs to know that it's registered in your legal name. So I wouldn't let that be a deterrent. But I would say think about it a lot before you make the decision, because it is sort of harder to change your name. I've seen some people do that, and it's always a little bit weird when you get to know somebody by one name and then all of a sudden they have a different name. And I'm not sure whether that really hurts viewership or not. It's definitely something that you could do if you started with a name and then wanted to change. A few things that I would think about are what you want your art channel to be about. So if you're somebody who wants to share tips or maybe sell things, maybe having a brand name might be a good idea. If you live alone or you really are a stickler about privacy, then maybe you don't want to share your name. So I have friends who have art channels and they don't use their names because they want to keep their professional life separate from their YouTube art life. And then I have other friends who do use their name, like me, So I actually use my maiden name. I don't use my legal married name, although my maiden name is my middle name, mostly because my husband's name is kind of known in the music world. And so I just thought it was simpler to keep things separate. And also I had a whole career before we even met in art using my maiden name. So it just seemed like the logical choice for me. I have lots of other friends who are creators online that also use their regular name. I would say if you're somebody who loves to do art and maybe wants to have gallery showings or sell your art or be known not only for your YouTube channel, but also for yourself as an artist, then I would probably encourage you just to start out by using your name and people will get to know it. And then when they talk about your channel, they're not talking about it as a separate name, but they're talking about it as you. Right? So there's no confusion and there will be that name recognition if you decide to write a book or decide to publish a series. So it swings and roundabouts. There's no wrong or right answer. I would just say maybe weigh up all those things and decide for yourself, and good luck to you. And if you do get started on your YouTube channel, send me your first video. I'd love to see it. The next question is from @AnitaEvans8105, and she asks, can you tell us how to paint a white dog in watercolor? Well, that is not the easiest thing to explain, but maybe sometime I'll do a tutorial on that. Maybe I'll put that over on Patreon if I do. If other people are interested, let me know in the comments, and it's something that I can think about maybe doing a video about. I don't usually do a lot of tutorials, but I can definitely address it here as best as I can. So the main thing that I would say is don't think about it as a white dog, because white is never really pure white. There's always a lot of reflected color depending on the things around it, depending on the light source. And so you want to be looking for those hidden colors. Usually with a white dog, you're going to see lots of blues and violets, but you might also see some golden pops of color. It really just, again, depends on the lighting and the colors around it. I would suggest when you look at your little cute white dog, I've noticed you have one in your thumbnail picture, but just squint at your dog and look at the colors that you see. Look at the shadowed areas, and those shadows are going to have color in them. So look to see where you have that color. And that's the main thing. I think whenever we paint or draw anything, it's very easy for our brain to get in the way and trick us into thinking, oh, this is going to be really hard. If it's something metallic and it's reflecting everything, that can be off-putting for people. Or if it's a tree with thousands of leaves, that can be off-putting. So the main thing is to stop thinking about your dog as a white dog. And again, go to that pretend you're an alien idea. Pretend you're an alien, you've just landed here, you've seen this little creature and you're squinting at it, and your job is to be an artist and do sketches for everything to bring back to your home planet. And so you're just going to be painting what you see. You don't know that it's a dog. You don't know what white fur is, potentially. So you're just going to be looking at the shapes and the colors that you see. And so put those in. And also pay attention to the background, because what's surrounding the dog in your painting is going to be a really good frame for it. And that will help enhance the whites as well. So I hope that helps. The next question is from @MichelleLee2397. And there are actually two questions here that are quite similar. So her question is, I would like to know what you do with all of your paintings, the larger ones in particular. And are you in an area where there are a lot of artists and opportunities to get involved in the art community? And then there's also a question by @MimaMakes. And she says, how do you store and or display your loose mini paintings, those not in a sketchbook? I put many of mine in a sketchbook where I've made two slits opposite of each other on each page that two edges of the painting can slip into, if that makes sense. Yes, I think so. That does make sense, and that's really clever. So basically, the question is, how do I store my paintings? Not just my mini paintings, but also my larger paintings. And what do I do with them? And the easy answer is that I hoard them. I don't sell my art very often. I'm more likely to give it away. In fact, most of my art before 2014, I don't even have anymore. Whenever I've moved, I've usually given them away. All of the large paintings that I did, almost all of them, I've given to friends or former students. Whenever I moved a lot. Up until moving to England, I was moving, like every 5-6 years. So I traveled lightly and I just got rid of stuff. I would often hate my work a few years after I did it anyway, so it wasn't that big of a hardship to get rid of it. I think I have one large painting from my university days, and that is in my shed, hopefully not ruined. So for my oil paintings, I varnish them and then I leave them out to cure. Well, I leave them to dry, and then after 6 months or so, I'll varnish them to protect them. And then I allow that to cure and dry. And then I pretty much just stack them. Sometimes I'll put little thin popsicle sticks between them just to help them not stick, because I've noticed even when you allow things to dry, sometimes that can be a casualty. I do the same for my smaller oil paintings. For a bunch of minis that I did, I just have them in a rack behind me. I've never really put them away because I'm afraid of them sticking. Some of them are in a stack. I get little things like dish racks or the little things that hold toast in hotels, and I can put little mini paintings in those. So a lot of times I'll just kind of keep them as a display if I'm not storing them, or I'll just stack them together and stash them somewhere. For my mini paintings, sometimes I'll put them in a little frame. Sometimes I'll give them away if they're not in sketchbooks. Sometimes I just hang them on the edge of a bookshelf or just display them in some way around the room, or keep them in a little box. That's sort of fun too, to just sort of leaf through them, and it keeps them protected and helps with them not fading. Some of my medium-sized work, it's in frames around the house, or I'll take little folders and I just have those stashed around. I also have a Victorian writing desk. I have a bunch of artwork in there. For my ink drawings, my original ink drawings, I have a separate box and I keep them in there sort of labeled by the date that I did them. So basically I just have all of my art squired all around me in different places. Most of it is somewhere in my studio or in a frame around my house or in my mother's house. She gets a lot of my art. So I hope that gave you some ideas. And then also the part about, are there opportunities where I live to get involved with the arts? Yes, definitely. Do I take advantage of them? Not really. Honestly, it's a lot of work just running a Patreon and YouTube and trying to actually be with my family and enjoy my life as well. So I just don't have a lot of time for that anymore. I was more involved before I started social media. I had an atelier in my house and I was teaching privately before COVID hit. And that's when I started sharing things online and then teaching online. So I do still have some art friends who are local and I meet with them from time to time and we'll paint. I also love to meet with other art YouTubers because they understand the assignment. So we can kind of marry work and play together. They're not shy of filming. We can get some content for each other's channels, as well as spending time together and doing art. So yeah, I do like to meet with other people. I don't do it as much as I'd like to, but again, it is something that I try to factor into my life as much as I can. The next question is from @JustAGreenGuy. Do you ever find yourself facing an art block? And if so, how do you manage to escape it? And then there's a related question by @JoanBArt. And she says, how do you reinvigorate your art practice to keep it fun and fresh for yourself? How do you get past creative slumps when they occur? So the answer to both of those questions is yes, I have art blocks all the time, really. Only I don't really think of them as art blocks. I kind of think of it more as art fear. Basically, that happens for me whenever I'm away from art. So if I keep a steady stream or a steady practice of doing art, I really don't get into a block. But if I'm having some health issues, or if I'm just really busy, maybe I go on holiday, or I have some external obligations and I'm away from creating art for a while, I find that fear builds very quickly. And I start to look at my old art, and that doesn't even really make it better. That just makes me think things like, oh, you've lost it. Those days are gone. Those were the glory days and you've forgotten, which is just silly. That's just your inner critic talking, and we all have one. And so I have found that a few things work best for me in combating the art fear or art block. One of those is morning pages. And if you're not familiar with what those are, check out Julia Cameron's The Artist's Way. And she talks all about using morning pages, which is basically just a stream of consciousness type of writing. Another great author to check out is Natalie Goldberg. She talks in great detail about how to do that. And their books were both released around the same time. I think they even know each other. So I think they maybe played off of each other a little bit in some of their ideas, although that's pure conjecture. So don't quote me on that. But that idea of starting my day not by picking up my phone, but just with a cup of tea and just writing down my first thoughts. Sometimes I won't even put my glasses or contacts in. I'll just start writing. And I don't allow myself to do anything else. That always gets me out of a slump, because usually I'm just free writing and all my fears get dumped out on the page. And then I feel like I can move past them more easily. So that is such a huge tip for me and something that really helps me. The second thing that always helps me is just getting outside and painting. So I have a little plein air mobile, my little van conversion that's kitted out as a little mobile art studio. And if I just go out in that, or even just go out in my garden, or just go to a spot in nature and start to draw, it really helps center me. And I always think, oh, why was this so hard? Why didn't I just do that? Why did I stop? So just getting outside in nature, drawing or painting, and just putting myself in that location almost always helps too. And then the third thing that I do is I come in my studio. If you don't have a studio, just surround yourself with your art supplies or your art things. But if I come in here and I start playing with my supplies, start refreshing my palettes, start organizing things, maybe doing some swatches, that always helps, because just getting my hands on my art in like a user-friendly way, where I'm not having any expectations on myself other than to just play with them, that helps get me back in gear. So those three things really help me. Morning pages, getting outside and painting, and just immersing myself in my art supplies just for playing. So I hope those help you both as well, and anybody else. The next question is from @themessydesk_XYZ, who asks, tell us more about yourself and the art that you do over the many years of your career and how it has evolved over time. So this is such a long answer. I'm going to try to make it as brief as I can, because I feel like it's probably not that interesting to really delve deep into it. But I grew up in the conceptual time of art, I still think conceptual art is very, very prominent, especially in universities, where the focus wasn't on technique as much as it was ideas and originality. And so consequently, a lot of the teachers that I had weren't schooled or educated themselves in the techniques, and so they weren't able to pass them on. So it was a really frustrating recipe. And I just sort of fell prey to that. I thought, well, you should just intuitively be able to draw portraits or people or scenes in front of you. It was a really frustrating exercise, to be honest. I was really lucky that when I was 6, from the ages of 6 to 12, my mother booked both my brother and I in with a local retired illustrator, and we had private oil painting lessons every Saturday for a couple hours. And I still think back to a lot of the things that that man taught me, even though I don't remember that much because I was so young. But he taught me a lot about light source and form and shading and things that I didn't really learn from the more traditional educational outlets. There weren't even that many books in my local library back then. Obviously, we didn't have the internet. I think it's such an amazing time to be an artist now because, gosh, you have your pick. You can just Google watercolor tutorials and you can find hundreds, if not thousands of people on YouTube alone who are offering free advice. So you can really learn a lot online. Also, there are more books than ever, really quality books about learning art. So I think that's great. But I'm meandering. So back to how my art has changed. When I was in university, I kind of fell prey to that. You had to be original. You had to do big works. So I did a lot of big, expressive paintings. And most of them were, not that good, probably. And then I still had this quest for learning. So a lot of what I learned was from taking private workshops with professional artists who did the type of art that I wanted to learn. So my art was definitely influenced by those people. And also it was influenced a lot by teaching because I had to get my own education in line in order to teach. I always brought myself back to beginner's mind and remembered the things that frustrated me. And so that has led me as a teacher. So when I was teaching at university, I just loved portraiture. I loved portraiture as a child, as a teenager, in my 20s and my 30s. It really wasn't until I moved to England that I became enamored with the landscape. So it was a little bit of that. And it was also being exposed to my first plein air painting festival, which was in 2016, I think. And just meeting this whole group of professional artists who made a living by painting the landscape and selling their paintings. It was just such a novelty to me. And it just such a breath of fresh air because I had been surrounded in academia by all of these conceptual artists. Not that there's anything bad with that, but it just really wasn't who I was as an artist. And it wasn't how I taught. So I wasn't always that popular with some of my colleagues who really just scoffed the fact that I taught my students skills and focused on that, because I just always believed that if you want to paint conceptually, it's better to learn the skills first. So if you look back at the original expressionists, they all learned traditional methods and then they were able to go out and explore and be more expressive with having that toolkit of skills underneath their belt. So when I taught at university, my skills were more traditionally based. I taught oil painting using traditional methods, which are very different from the methods you use oil painting outside, which is called alla prima or all at once. So when I started painting outside, I felt like a beginner because my first paintings were absolutely terrible. I didn't know how to paint all at once. I didn't know how to finish a completed painting. I only knew how to do layers and glazing and allowing things to dry before you came in with a second layer. So that was really an exciting and daunting opportunity for me. But the thing I loved about plein air painting is it really opened me up to the world of color and color mixing. And I feel that as a result of that, I'm just a better artist than I've ever been before. And my concepts of color are much more advanced than they used to be. So that's a really long answer to your question, but I hope that gives you some ideas about how things have changed for me over time. Working big and expressive to the portraiture phase to scaling things down, first with oil painting and then the line and wash that I love to do so much right now. The next question is from at Ultimate650, who asks, who, if any, is your favorite artist or someone who's had the biggest influence on you? So I've answered that a little bit. I have an array of artists that have influenced me and whose work I love. I really love illustrators. There are many illustrators who I've always been fascinated with. I think the old school illustrators especially really were taught skills, and so their work was more advanced than a lot of other work that I was seeing from modern artists. So I've always loved illustrators. Some of my favorites are Eloise Wilkins. She illustrated several of the early Golden books. I love Tasha Tudor, who also illustrated lots of lovely children books. Chris Van Allsburg, who illustrated lots, including The Polar Express. And also, I think Jumanji. I love Jan Brett. Oh my gosh, I love her work. She's amazing. I love her use of borders and just the charm and the storytelling that she gets done with her work. I love Don Wood, who has illustrated one of my favorite all-time books, which is called Hecate Peg. I mean, I think they're award-winning illustrations. I'm also inspired by a lot of artists from the past, a lot of the traditional ones that inspire lots of people. I love Rembrandt. I love his paintings and his use of light, but mostly I just love his drawings and his etchings and the way he used lines in them. I study them all the time. I just pore over his work. Whenever I feel myself getting in a rut or getting too tight with my lines, I'll look at some of his stuff and just maybe practice just copying some of the strokes, because I find that really educational and inspirational. I also love Van Gogh, which is a bit cliche, but I love the way that he uses really creative brushwork in his paintings and his use of playful color. I love Mary Cassatt and her storytelling and her scenes of everyday life and mothers and children. I love Camille Pissarro. I was not that familiar with him until just going to museums, and I have noticed throughout my life that every time I go into a room of different impressionists, his paintings always stand out to me from the crowd. So I really love his application of paint. I also like artists like Grandma Moses. I love her naivety. I love that style. I also love her life story. I love that she didn't start painting until she was 76 years old. She lived a whole life before then as a farmer's wife, raising 6 kids. And she would just do needlepoint. And then when her arthritis got too bad to do that, she just started painting and, painted for 20 something years and made a whole second career. So I love the inspiration of her story. A few of my modern favorite plein air artists are Charlie Hunter. I just adore him. I've bought everything that he's ever put out. He has a couple videos on oil painting and his process. I've been fortunate enough to see him paint at some plein air festivals, and I've watched several of his demos, and he's just such an amazing person also. There's also another plein air artist named Kathy Odom, and I just love the charm of her paintings. I love the colors that she uses. I've been able to watch some demos with her as well, and she's just amazing. And those are just some of the artists. There are several, but that just gives you an idea of some of my absolute favorites. Now, moving on to the next question, which is from at the Nail Polish Hound. My question is about how you found your specific watercolor style as used in your miniature paintings. I've always loved to draw. In fact, I think I love drawing more than painting, to be honest, although I love painting a lot too, and increasingly more all the time. But I just love drawing. I love drawing so much. It's my go-to thing. And so I think what happened was when I started turning more towards watercolors, and that happened around the time when just oil painting is quite toxic. And it was before I started non-toxic methods of oil painting. I sort of just focused on drawing for a long time and then drawing with watercolors. So the line and wash method. And my early ones were a little bit looser with the line work, but as I developed my styles with ink, I just really got into ink drawing and then started doing that as a line and wash. So my style just developed over time that way. A lot of times I just like to make my ink drawings as complete as possible, and then I'll come in with the watercolor, almost to treat it like an old-fashioned tinted photograph, the way they used to tint old photographs. So yeah, it just sort of developed organically. And then when I started the tiny painting, it just seemed natural to do a little drawing first in ink and then go in with the watercolor. It felt a little bit quicker, although I don't know that it is. But yeah, that's pretty much how my style developed, just following the things that I loved the most and exploring with different materials. The next question is from at Amethyst Moonlight 7429. And she says, oh, it's so sweet. She says, congratulations. I'm so happy for you. You're my role model adult. I'm in my 20s now and I was watching you since I'm 17 or something. I am curious, what's your best advice for someone like me who is self-taught and wants to learn and progress, but lacks the time and effort to do so? First of all, it's messages like that that just really make my day. Sometimes I'll get emails and I don't always have time to respond to them. So if you've ever sent me an email, please know that I read it and it made my day, even if I didn't respond, although I usually try my best to. Anyhow, I think there are two questions in this question. So the first thing that you're asking is that you lack the effort. So there are two different things, lacking the time and lacking the effort. So first of all, I'm going to start with lacking the effort. And so my thought would be, if you don't really have the inspiration to put in the effort, then maybe you need to just take a little break, and that's okay. It doesn't mean you're never going to come back to art. I just told you about Grandma Moses, who didn't start until she was 76. Even though I've been teaching art almost all of my adult life, I have had periods where I wasn't really creating that much in my own time because maybe I was more interested in music or something else or just raising kids. So it's perfectly okay to take time away. It doesn't mean you have to not appreciate art or watch videos about art or read books. I think it's fine to take a break. So if you're feeling like you don't want to put in the effort or you don't have the time to put in the effort, I think that's okay. It doesn't mean you won't come back to it. That said, if you do want to put the time in, but you just can't find the time to do it, here are some tips for you. And this is what I would say to my students at university. I always required them to keep a little sketchbook, and I required them to do 1 page a week from Drawing from Life on their normal journeys, and then one that was a master copy or some assignment that I gave them. So a lot of times I'd give them an assignment like draw a master copy from an artist or draw the scene outside of your window, or I'd give them some type of assignment. And then I'd also have them do a page of just drawing whatever they wanted, but it had to be based on something that they saw from real life. And I would say you can get a lot done with that in just a few minutes. So you don't have to put expectations on yourself to have completed pieces or to be a professional or to even create things that you feel like sharing with anybody. Just carrying a little sketchbook, even just a tiny little sketchbook like this and a pencil or two, and just keeping it in your bag and having it always with you, you can do little sketches all the time. So times when you would pull out your phone to check messages, instead do a little 5-minute sketch. So if you're waiting in line or in a waiting room or you're waiting for a friend, those are good times. If you're watching TV and maybe you're watching a commercial break or you're just a little bored or feeling antsy and you want to multitask, pull out your sketchbook and draw some of the things around you. I always feel like 5 minutes a day is going to give you more motivation and help you build your skills more quickly than 1 solid hour a week. Because when you're drawing little things, you're exercising your creativity. And it's that constant exercise, just like if you're doing a workout program. It's the slow and steady that's going to show you the most improvements and also will help motivate you. So that's something that I would recommend doing if you're lacking the time. Also, you say that you're self-taught and you want to learn. So I would recommend getting some good books. I've given some recommendations here on YouTube. I also give recommendations over on my Patreon quite a bit. If anybody's interested, let me know in the comments because I can make a video sharing some of my favorite art books to help self-taught artists like yourself get started. So I think a good book can make a world of difference, but you have to actually do the exercises in the book as well. It's not enough just to read it, although you can learn a lot just by reading it, but actually take the advice of the people in those books. Or if you're not somebody who really learns well from books, buy a video from one of your favorite artists who does the type of work that you like to do, or enroll in one of their classes, or enroll in a community class. Sometimes just having a community art class that you go to all the time is going to really help you build your skills. And it's something that's fun and can usually be worked into even busy schedules. So those are my ideas, and I hope those help. The next question is from @Philippa12345, and she asks, I would like to ask, how long did it take you to take the step into creating a YouTube channel? What advice would you give to someone thinking of starting their own videos? So this is something really that I can make a whole video about. I have so much to say. I'm going to try to summarize things as best as I can. So I would say it took me about 17 years, which I'm joking, but I think my first video was posted like 17 years ago. But I only put up a handful of videos over a period of a few years, and they were all music videos. So you can go back and look through those. I think the video quality on them has degraded over time. I think that's a little bit sad that YouTube does that. They used to have better clarity, but there are millions of videos that they're hosting, so it makes sense that ones from 17 years ago aren't going to be as good of a quality. I think I always wanted to do an art YouTube channel, especially when I was teaching at university. But then I'd see people like Stan Prokopenko who just had these mad skills, and I would just recommend him to my students instead of making my own videos because I just really lacked the expertise to be able to do any video editing. But I think since then, things have become easier. And also a lot of people have different styles. Not everybody is highly edited. So for me, I started small and it just sort of happened accidentally. So it was something I always wanted to do. I was intimidated for a long time by my lack of knowledge. It just felt like too steep of a mountain to be able to climb. But my daughter went to university in 2021. And before she left, I was thinking about trying to grow my Instagram. And so I learned how to do a reel, and which seemed insurmountable at the time. But she said to me, Mom, if you're going to do Instagram, you might as well do TikTok. So I did. And I actually really loved TikTok. I did that almost exclusively for a full year and then branched out into Instagram and then eventually YouTube. So when I started posting art channels on YouTube, it was, I think, in early 2023 or late 2022. I'll have to check that. I basically started by posting the shorts that I'd had success with on TikTok. So the ones that I thought were the best, I always kept original copies. And so I started putting those up on YouTube. And my strategy was every day, right? So I noticed that there weren't that many people posting shorts at the time. So I thought that might be a way to help grow my audience. It did help grow my audience. And then when I caught up, I think I had a couple months worth of videos to do every day. I also did a series, like a 10 tip series and then a 30-day series. And so that helped as well. And I then realized that when I started to post longer videos, they didn't really get a lot of views because the audience that I had for my short videos is very different to the audience I have for my longer ones. And it was really my wish to build more of a community or something that was a little bit more personalized. And the way to do that was through long form. So that was around the same time when I was getting burnt out on short form. And I found that I had to step back a little bit to really build my long form audience because that for me just was more what I wanted to do. My advice to you would be think about, do you want to do short form or long form? It's not that you can't do both, but I would choose one to be your predominant one. And if you're going to be producing long videos, I wouldn't post more short videos in a week than you do long ones, if that makes sense, because the algorithm does push the videos out to different audiences. So I've been posting regularly on YouTube for about 3 years. And so here are my 5 tips that I've narrowed down for you. So number 1, I would say start small and just try everything. When I started, I thought I was going to go in one direction. I started by just sharing illustrations I was doing for a CD. And then after I did the CD, I just posted everything. I did some little personalized ones. I did some tips. I just basically was sharing everything that I was doing in the studio. If I didn't feel like actually creating, I'd share things like my supplies or how I filled a palette. And, you'd be surprised at the things that you just learn that you enjoy doing. And then eventually I happened on the world of tiny painting, which I probably never would have started doing or discovered if not for having the expectation of making videos regularly and needing to come up with content. And so I didn't really develop what I wanted to share on YouTube for a good year or two. So my advice to you would be, don't feel like you need to have all the answers. Don't feel like you need to have all the skills. Your first videos are going to be terrible. That's just the nature of making videos. My first videos are like cringeworthy. So just get started, get started, and then you can go back and you can look at those old ones and appreciate the progress and the skills that you've amassed over time. The other thing I would say is do what you love. So don't try to do something just for views or to try to make money, it has to come from a place within. It has to be authentic in you. If you're somebody who loves oil painting, don't think, oh, I'm going to do drawing because the drawing videos are popular. Just do what you love. Do what you love, and you'll build your audience, and maybe it can turn into a career or just supplemental income or just a really fun hobby. So that would be my advice to you as well, is just do what you love. Eventually, I would also say, look at what the audience that you are building is responding to. And if it's something that you also love to do, then think about what your niche is. So don't keep it too broad, like just, I'm an artist and I do all kinds of art things is a very broad niche, right? So are you going to be tips focused or tutorial focused? Are you going to have a talking channel or a quiet channel? Are you going to have adventures of your painting or do artist vlogs? Think about that. You don't need to have that answer today. Just try it all out and see what works best for you and what feels most natural. But eventually, once you've sort of explored everything, choose a niche and then maybe come up with a more refined plan and stick with it. And then I would say just also be consistent. So come up with a regular schedule and stick to it. So if your schedule is once a week, post once a week. If it's once a week long form, post once a week long form. If you're posting short form, I would post a couple times a week. A lot of people will say every day. I don't think that's necessary. I think quality is more important than quantity, especially on YouTube. So I would say maybe 3 days a week if it's short form, but be consistent because the algorithm will push out your work if you're consistent. If you post sporadically, it will affect your views. Whenever I've taken like even just a week off, views are lower, definitely, even if it's a good video. So be consistent, come up with a schedule that works for you and that is realistic, even if it's once every 2 weeks, but just come up with that schedule and be consistent with it. And then finally, I would say just choose short or long, which I've already talked a little bit about. So choose what you want to do and have that be your main focus. So those are my main tips. There's quite a lot of them. I hope that helps you get started, and good luck, and send me a link to your first video because I'd love to see it. All right, so I think I got through all of the questions that I saw. I hope that that was useful and informative to all of you. And I really, again, just want to thank you so much for helping me grow this channel. It has become such a wonderful space for me. I've met so many interesting people, not only other artists who create YouTube channels, but so many of you just through my Patreon or through writing to me or through the comments that you leave here. I really feel like I've gotten to know this community here, and that the artwork that I do and the tips that I share are adding some value to the lives of some of you. And honestly, that was my main inspiration in starting this channel. But I couldn't have done it without all of you. So again, thank you so much. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I hope you're all having a beautiful day, and go make some magic.